So let's have a chat about how to read. This is one of the most important videos and it's going to be filled with tons of actionable, important advice and fundamentals and philosophy. We're actually going to do an entire course on this. It's going to be a very long one, a very deep one, and the course, How to Read, is going to aim to take you across many years and read all different types of texts. It's going to be good, but we're going to try and compress as much as we can into this one video because learning how to read is learning how to think. It's about critical thinking, it's about understanding how you think and feel about something, clarity of thought, and learning how to read properly is learning how to write. You can't really learn to write unless you've learned to read, and you're probably saying right now, I know how to read, I went to school, I know my ABCs, that's fine, but did you know there's actually multiple types of reading? People talk about speed reading, for example, but the thing is, a good speed reading course should actually teach you to read different books, appropriate books, at different levels and different speeds. Some books need a speed read, but a specific type of speed read where you're trying to ascertain specific facts that are going to help you. So you go into a book with a question and you come out with answers quickly. Some books need to be read extremely slowly. Now there's four main styles of reading that we're going to talk about. There's elementary reading, there's inspectional reading, there's observational reading, and there's synoptic reading. Before we get into that, let's just quickly talk about what type of reader you should be. Now, if this is super intuitive, bear with me because it's going to get a bit more involved. Now, firstly, you've probably heard about the importance of being an active reader. What is an active reader? An active reader is somebody that goes to the page with a pen and pad and goes there with a mind full of questions they want answers to, and they're there to study and learn, they're there to take information away. They're attentive, they're making notes, they're thinking about what they're reading. Now, people talk about highlighting and annotations. Annotations are good. There's an art to what we call marginalia, but highlighting a textbook, for example, there's no studies that prove that that improves comprehension or clarity of thought. What is actually better when you're actively reading something, just say you come to a page, get to the end of the page, cover the page up, and then say out loud or whisper it or say to yourself, but say it, tell yourself what just happened or what the main argument of what you just read was. Say, Ben, what have I just read? Okay, Plato is talking about governance, and he's talking about the best people in government are X, Y, and Z, people who don't want to be there. I don't know. Whatever you're reading. Or you could do something called the Feynman technique, where you write out the argument that you've just read. You can do this for every page, or you can do it for just the pages that are most important to you, but you write it out with no terminology, explaining in as crystallized, simple, pure language as possible, like you're talking to a 5-year-old, like you're talking to somebody who has no idea what the subject's about, and that's how you improve comprehension. Now, there are several goals to reading. Let's talk about the goals. There is reading for information. There is reading for, obviously, entertainment. There's reading for understanding. And there's reading for enlightenment. Now, it's very important that you choose your books wisely. When you're coming to an essay or when you're reading for any reason whatsoever, if you're reading to expand your knowledge on a topic, you must choose books that are over your head. That means they stretch you. That means you're choosing books that you might not fully understand the meaning at first glance. And that's important. The first read isn't really about fully getting everything. It's about trying to understand. And here's a main principle that you should keep in mind. Seek first to understand, then seek to be understood. You can't write about something until you understand it. Now, being an active reader means you ask yourself, what is being said in the book? And then once you've answered that succinctly, what is being said? You answer, how is it being said? And then you ask yourself, is it true? And then you ask yourself, what of it? This is a formula by Mortimer Adler, who is the leading authority on reading for comprehension, active reading, and different levels of reading. Now, elementary reading is literally just about understanding the words on the page. This is a word, how it all fits together, and that's it. Then you get to inspectional reading. Inspectional reading is the art of skimming and speed reading. The art of skimming is the art of being able to very quickly identify what information is most pertinent to you. So when people talk about reading a book a day or something crazy, or speed reading thousands of pages, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about picking up a book and being able to solidly, and I'm going to teach you how to do this, solidly find exactly what you need as quickly as possible. There are some books that you just don't want to spend days and days and weeks reading. There are journals, there are textbooks, there are different academic studies, whatever. There are some books where, to be honest, you want to spend anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour tops. But if you can pick out the key arguments in that book within 5 minutes, you're set. And then you start building your bibliography out, you start building your thought out, you start thinking more, you start expanding your awareness. You're treating reading, again, this is what an active reader does, you're treating reading as though it is a teacher that will lead you to discovering things. Okay, it's not a teacher in the sense that they instruct you and they tell you this and rote memorization and you reiterate facts. They're just there to facilitate your learning. Okay, it's like a Socratic dialogue. They're just leading you, and then it's up to you to piece things together. Analytical reading is about mulling things over, rereading. So inspectional reading, you might have a book and you pick out the main argument. You go, right, actually what I need to know right now is on page 257 to 259, but mainly this paragraph. When you isolate and you find exactly what you need for your argument, your essay, then you might want to do analytical reading. You isolate paragraphs, sentences, read, reread, break it down, branch things off, examine underlying assumptions, chew it over, mull it over in your mind, let it ferment, let it grow new life. And then you've got synoptic reading, which is probably the hardest level of reading and requires life experience. Synoptic reading is basically connecting what you've read to everything else. It's connecting what you've got in front of you to the grand questions about life. It's connecting what one writer has said to what another writer has said. Even though they might not be each other's influence, they might not have been in the same century or the same country, you're connecting everything, and that is synoptic reading, and that is the ultimate goal as readers. Right, let's look at how to read inspectionally, or basically how to skim and find out information that you need quickly, what the system is. Now, just say you've got a big old book, Charles Darwin, on the origin of species. This is a book that has defeated many an academic man and woman. It is big, it is heavy, it's got a lot of historical, life-changing, world-changing, society-changing, religion-changing arguments. It's a big book. Now, just say you're writing an essay on, I don't know, variation between species, or you're writing about natural selection. Well, where on earth do you start? Okay, I'll tell you where you start. Now, the first thing you want to do with a book like this is to get real clear on the title. That seems a bit silly, but let's just start with absolute basics. The Origin of Species, The Voyage of the Beagle. Okay, so we know that there's two books in here, one called The Origin of Species and one called The Voyage of the Beagle. So this is going to help us classify and pigeonhole the book, which is what you need to do. You need to say, what is the book about, or what is the book trying to say? But first you need to know where it fits in, okay? Because one of these is a travel book and the other is a scientific manifesto, okay? Next, you're going to open the book, all right? And you're going to look at the contents page, okay? A lot of authors spend a great deal of time on their contents page and people just completely gloss over them. I know today, books written today usually don't have contents because people want to keep it as a surprise and stuff. The contents page is a very well-established historical institution that tells you about the book. Okay, so we know that there's two books, okay? Now, we want The Origin of Species, not The Voyage of the Beagle. So we're going to find that, Origin of Species. And all right, another thing you want to do, okay, we're going to do this before we turn to the title. There is a longer title here on the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favoured races in the struggle for life. So immediately you've got some terms, you've got some conditions. We're talking about natural selection, we're talking about favoured races and preservation, and we're talking about struggle for life. All right, this is good. You need to get clear on what the book is because this will help develop a roadmap. All right, now look at the contents page, yeah? And what you do is you just do a quick glance through it and you go, okay, chapter 1, variation under domestication, causes of variability, effects of habit, correlation of growth, inheritance. You read all that very quickly, okay? Variation under nature, chapter 2, variability, individual differences. So you're getting clear on how the book is laid out and what is to be involved and what you're going to read about. Chapter 3 is, let's have a look at that. Chapter 3 is struggle for existence, and you've got things like natural selection, rapid increase of naturalized animals and plants. Then you've got chapter 4, natural selection, okay, sexual selection, natural selection, namely intercrossing, isolation, number of individuals. So you read all this, laws of variation. You've got difficulties of theory, instinct. So you know what you're going to see in the book. Hybridism, and you go through all the contents, okay? After the contents, you're going to see if there's a bit of a preface or an introduction, okay? And there is. And you're going to read this very, very quickly just to get a sense of where the book sits and what its argument might be, okay? And then what you'll do is you'll turn, once you've done that, look, there's an author's introduction here, turn to the index. Indexes are really, really important, okay? And now, if you already have something that you want to know, that you're looking up, you're going to look to the index. So just so you're particularly interested in armadillos, look, you found armadillos here. Or maybe you're interested in, let's turn the page, Australian barrier reef, okay? Because you're writing about the preservation of the barrier reef and you're interested in what Darwin might have said. Well, you can see here, Australia, and then Australia barrier reef, 486, okay? Now, another thing you can do with an index is you can figure out what important things that are going to be talked about in the books by how many references something has. So look here, let's zoom in on this. You see bones, fossils, okay? And then it's broken down into lots of different subsets and there's a lot of different references, okay? So you're getting more of a sense. Now, another thing you might do, now this sounds really silly, but you might read the publisher's blurb. Now this one does have one. I took the dust jacket off just because I like it. And there's a little bit written. Easily the most influential book published in the 19th century, okay, so you know where it's published. A readable discussion of a scientific subject. The Origin of Species is published here. This is a little bit about that. And then you've got like blurbs on the back from Richard Dawkins talking about Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection is second to none. Think of what it explains. He goes on and on and on. Basically, the point is you're getting more of a flavour of what the book's about. And this is actually really, really important for inspectional reading. And then what you're going to do, you're going to go to the contents and you're going to try and find those sections of the book that seem pivotal to the central argument or pivotal to what you want to know about specifically. So I'm turning to the contents page. And let's see, what seems pivotal? Hybridism, not really. Geographical distribution, no. Natural selection, okay, chapter 4. Laws of variation, struggle for existence. Okay, just say you're doing a whole paper on struggle for existence. Just say you're talking about Schopenhauer and philosophy, but you want to talk about Darwinism. Well, struggle for existence. And then you go down and, struggle for life most severe between individuals and varieties. Okay, and then what you do, once you've found things that are pivotal to the argument or pivotal to what you want to talk about, you flip through the book and you dip in here and there to what might interest you. Just reading and finding things and picking stuff out. This doesn't take very long, but this is inspectional reading, okay? And this is not the only way to read. This isn't speed reading. This isn't how I recommend you read like literature, for example. But if you're looking, this is reading with an aim to get specific facts out of it or specific ideas, okay? Let's do another one. I've got this book here, The Craft of the Novel by Colin Wilson. Just say you're writing an essay on the rise and fall of the novel. This is a good one. Immediately you look at the cover. Examination of novels and novelists from the viewpoint of teaching creative writing. Among the writers discussed are Burgess, Dickens, Dostoevsky, Faulkner, Flaubert, Tolstoy, whatever. And now you're thinking, I want an example to be Tolstoy. So you think, right, what has he said about Tolstoy? You can quickly read the dust jacket, and then you go to the contents page, and as you can see, I love old books because they proper do outline everything. Even old books of literature, if you pick up a Dickens novel, for example, the beginning of the chapter tells you exactly what's going to happen. It's full of spoilers. And then what you do, you go, oh look, there's Tolstoy here. So I'm going to go to that, and you make it a bit easier, go to the index, and again, start looking for what you want to see, and also looking for what just stands out generally. So like, who has a lot of references, for example? James Joyce has tons. So you start thinking, this guy has a lot to say about Joyce. Should I be talking about Joyce in my work? Okay. You do this with any type of work. You can do this with the work on working out, physiology in the body. Just so you want to find out about, you're doing a whole paper on electrolytes and H2O. Well, you're not going to read the whole book. You're going to do that quick method that I told you about, especially the contents index, and you're going to go and locate it and find it. Once you've found the information, you might stick to it a bit closely and you might really think about it and reread it and go over it again and again, but you're not going to go through an entire book. I know this sounds probably quite intuitive to a lot of people, but if it's not, this is a good thing to know, and it'll set you in good stead. We can do with this book. This is Human Diversity, a big solid book, and it is full full of studies and stuff like this. This works really well for textbooks. So you look and you know from the cover that they're going to challenge 3 main arguments. Gender is a social construct, race is a social construct, class is a function of privilege. So then maybe you go, you know what, I want to talk about gender, but there's specific things about gender that I want to talk about. So you flip to the contents, let's see if I can find it. Okay, part 1, gender is a social construct, and it's broken into 5 parts. Frameworks, differences in personality, differences in neurocognitive functioning, differences in educational vocational choices, differences in the brain. And you think, well, actually I'm quite interested in vocational choices. You go 68, you flip over, and that's where you start doing the deeper reading. You do inspectional reading to get there, and deeper reading for that. That's a style of reading that's very important to do. Now, inspectional reading and X-raying a book, that's what it's called X-raying a book. This is perhaps the first step to analytical reading. So if you pick up a book that you want to read analytically a bit more in depth, first you want to read it a little bit inspectionally, and then the first thing you want to do is you want to pigeonhole the book, because what book it is really influences what you're going to get out of it and what the author's message is and whether it adheres or is true to their intentions and stuff. History, for example, is different to a science book. A science has propositions or theorems that they want to, outline, whereas a history is more of a narrative, and it's meant to be a truthful narrative. If a book of philosophy has theories too. But so what you want to do is you want to pigeonhole a book, okay? A poem, for example, is going to be different from a series of letters. One person who writes both is Horace, the ancient poet. He's written epistles. As you think, what's an epistle? You can even look it up. You can Wikipedia it. Epistle, it's a letter. So you start thinking, okay, he's Roman, and he's got this. There's this long tradition of writing letters. So then you start thinking, okay, is it in the tradition of Marcus Aurelius, who also wrote letters? Is it in the tradition of Seneca? And you're starting to think, does this letter, does it adhere to the generic conventions, for example? And then once you do that, you want to go through and you want to state the unity of the book. If it's a story, you want to talk about plot. You want to say, this happens, this happens, this happens. The characters are this, this, and this. If it's a book of philosophy, like, for example, some Aristotle, on the soul, yeah? You want to start outlining the argument as you kind of go along. The argument is this, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for what is the author trying to do? What is he trying to prove or teach you or talk about? And then once you know what they're trying to do, then you can talk about or question them or, decide whether they've adhered to what they set out to do or not. And that's the deeper level of reading. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the effective note-taking video. If you take anything away from this, just make sure that you go into your books with an air of seriousness, like levity, and also play. And there's no full rules that say, like, oh, you have to read one book all the way through until the end. Just go in with a sense that you're going to demand something of the book. You want to find out what they're saying, and you want to do it quick enough within the timeframes that are allotted to you, and you're going to divide the book up to different styles of reading. So some passages you might read more closely, but you'll find which passages you have to read closely by doing inspectional reading, X-raying the book, and then going straight there, basically. So that's a little primer. If you want to know more about how to read, then just let me know, and I'll put you on the list for enrolment for the How to Read course, which will come out in a few months' time.